everyone. How are you? Okay. I'm going to read chapter 23 from this book. Mind Prison. It's only a few pages, so it's just a short, sweet situation. From the earliest days of such research, a ready source of human fodder for experimentation has been found in prisons. This has not exactly been kept secret. In 1962, James V. Bennett, at the time the director of the U.S. Bureau of Prisons, encouraged psychiatrists and social scientists to use the tremendous opportunity that 24,000 incarcerated and helpless prison inmates offered for experimentation. He said, "We here in Washington are anxious to have you undertake some of these things, perhaps on your own. Undertake a little experiment on what you can do with the Muslims, what you can do with sociopath individuals." So that must have been a longer thing because it had the ... meaning it was a long paragraph. Let me see. Kind and Usual Punishment is the book. In 1971, the Director of Corrections for California proposed the broad implementation of neurosurgery for violent inmates of prisons. That does not mean that this sort of surgery had not been done earlier. As an example, in 1968, 3 inmates at Vacaville Medical Facility had a portion of their brains' amygdalas mutilated. Amygdala. Reportedly in an attempt to quell their violent urges. In 1974, a prisoner at the Arizona State Prison wrote in the New York Times about a program of electroshock at the prison that was aimed at discouraging the activities of jailhouse lawyers and political radicals. The term the prisoners used for the program, he said, was Edison's medicine. Wow, dude. In October 1988, David Freitas, a 38-year-old prisoner at the Utah State Prison, serving a 1 to 15-year sentence for second-degree burglary, penned an open letter describing his experiences, protesting that he was being subjected to mind control torture. He indicated that 11 months prior he had had an altercation with another prisoner that he believed was the reason that a program of systematic mind control torture had been instituted against him. Freitas's account is detailed and believable. According to his letter, day after day they tampered with my food, smashing and removing items from my tray, and threatened to poison me with carcinogens and diseases. My mail received similar treatment. I was constantly verbally badgered as well as physically assaulted, and was told my parents would be murdered should I fail to maintain silence. Freitas believes that these harassments were used to drive him over the edge into losing his temper, thus providing justification for placing him in solitary confinement and for more intense harassment. Once isolated, Freitas relates, some extremely peculiar things began to occur. I became disoriented to the extent that my cell and surrounding area would take on a surrealistic appearance, as though I was under the influence of a hallucinogenic drug. Weird. And I was plagued by severe headaches and insomnia for weeks at a time. That sounds like scopolamine. I began to receive or hear high-frequency tones in my ears, like the test pattern on a TV set. The volume or intensity of these frequencies is adjustable, and some are so high and piercing that they've literally had me climbing the walls. When I plug my ears with cotton or fingertips, the tones are still inside and become amplified. This is something they're using on the public now, too, people. Just FYI. It's as if they'd become electrified echo chambers with the sounds coming from the inside out. When Fraudus complained, he says that he was thrown into a strip cell without clothes, mattress, toilet paper, or drinking water. After 5 months of harassment, Fraudus says that the torture escalated to the point that he admits that what happened would sound crazy to anyone not familiar with current capabilities of mind control technology. I began to hear voices in my ears, Fraudus reports. Voices that change pitch and timbre in contrast from being a cartoonish high and squeaky, descending through the octaves, including everything from sinister Darth Vader-ish to basically normal characteristics. The reception of these voices into my inner ears is as vivid as though I were listening to a set of stereo headphones, and they are able to mix, match, and blend them in conjunction with the frequency tones, creating a raucous cacophony of audio discord that disheartens the soul. Fraudus believes that eventually advanced technology was brought to bear upon him, to the extent that a computer mind-scanning machine was used on him capable of monitoring, picking apart, he describes it, his thoughts as well as physical functions. Fraudus said, with the apparent ease of manipulating a keyboard, they can, with the flick of a switch, strip me of all energy and motivation to where I'm forced to lie on my bunk and stare at the wall like a zombie. I've been left in this state for weeks at a time. Literally chained to my bed without the actual use of physical restraints. Having not the energy to walk back and forth in my cell even a few times. I have something to say about this. Okay, so Fraudus describes a list of devastating effects used to debilitate his body and his psyche, and admits that it would be hard for people to believe that prison officials would torment their captives in this manner. Corroborating his tale, he says, is a conversation with a paralegal advisor who told him that he had received similar complaints from other prisoners at the facility. And when Fraudus launched a legal suit against medical personnel at the facility, several inmates came forward to substantiate his claims, strikingly describing similar symptoms to those described by Fraudus. 46-year-old Robert LaSalle, also an inmate at Utah State Prison, who had been housed in a cell adjacent to Fraudus, describes with complete coherence and in great detail his own torment at what he believed was an electronic mind control technology. In an affidavit dated 11th of July, 1991, LaSalle stated, quote, that for approximately 5 years now, I have been subjected to some type of device or technology that causes me to receive voice transmissions into my inner ears, just as if I had little radio speakers in my head. That the voices I am hearing respond to my thoughts and punish me with electrical current cooking sensations when I do not cooperate or respond the way they want me to. That I have experienced periods of torment where I felt as if my body were made of metal and a giant magnet was pulling me to the floor so that I could not hardly get up from the bed and move around. That I often hear different tones of high and low frequency signals in my ears, like the test pattern on a TV set. LaSalle describes a variety of other effects, including itching and vibrating in the inner ear, electronic tones changing from high to low, an electronic assault that is so intense that he is completely incapacitated. He speaks at length about voices in his head, primarily female, that are sometimes interrupted by male authority figure voices. These voices tell him that he will be punished until he becomes cooperative, and that he is being punished for his past crimes. One telling factor, LaSalle states, is that the voice sometimes uses the name of prison or medical staff or inmates that he seldom comes in contact with, and thus would be unlikely to think about. In another affidavit, Utah State Prison inmate Frank Moxley, also imprisoned in a cell adjacent to Fraudus, stated that he has also been subjected to the influence of some type of device or technology that causes me to receive voice transmissions into my head, just as if I had little radio speakers in my inner ears. Moxley also reported that there are many inmates here at Utah Maximum Security having this mental communication system used on them, but that due to the methods employed in so doing, not many inmates are willing to speak of it. Robert Varner, also at Utah State Prison, stated in an affidavit dated June 10, 1991, that he had also endured apparent electronic assault and was aware of at least 6 other inmates who had similarly complained of these activities. Varner said that the sounds I experience in my inner ears consist of frequency-like ringing noises from which I can sometimes but not always distinguish voices. That when the voices are distinguishable, I sometimes hear things concerning my past history, and that these voices sometimes respond to my thoughts. Varner also reports high and low ringing sounds in my ears and pressure sensations in my ears. Excuse me. Another inmate of Utah State Prison, James F. Gardner, terrified about his own mind control harassment in an affidavit dated June 10, 1991, Gardner describes a variety of symptoms corresponding to electronic bombardment, including the effects of a device or technology that caused me to hear voices in my inner ears that gave me behavior instructions. Gardner experienced torturous headaches and intense pressure chamber sensations in my inner ears, to the end that I was driven to explosively aggressive behavior. That the mental voice communication process I am describing definitely involved thought comprehension, because the voices were able to respond to what I was thinking. And on one occasion, the voices advised me that certain inmates with whom I had had an altercation would be waiting to jump me with weapons on A block. The voices told me exactly who the inmates were and where they would be hiding, and all information was correct. There is no way I could have hallucinated such a situation. The experience of David Fraudus and other inmates at Utah State Prison is hardly solitary. Many other inmates have attempted legal action against the prison system, complaining that they have been subjected to electronic torture, some of it corresponding strikingly to this testimony of the men at Utah State Prison. These legal actions have uniformly been struck down by the courts as being frivolous. And yet, given our knowledge of advances in electronic mind control by the CIA and other agencies, and the similarity of statements between these inmates, these complaints seem very credible. They strongly suggest that electronic mind control technology is currently being used at prisons throughout America. America is not the only country where mind control techniques and experimentation have been employed on prisoners. Excuse me. In August of 1971, an experiment began in England using torture and sensory deprivation on Irish political prisoners. Many prisoners suffered permanent psychological debilitation and some died during the course of the experimentation, while some attempted suicide in order to escape the torture. After the protestations of a number of civil rights groups, including Amnesty International, a number of prisoners who had endured the torture were released without charges. Further confirmation of the use of electronic torture device comes from Electromagnetics News, detailing information originally published in the London Observer for January 13th, 1990. Wow. That's a long time ago, you guys. That was 30 years ago. Amazing to think about. According to the article, an electronic torture chamber using a white noise generator designed to pulse sound at 11 hertz, apparently ultimately capable of destroying the human body, has been installed by a British company, Electronic Intelligence, inside the headquarters of the special branch of Dubai, called the House of Fun. The torture chamber also houses a strobe light, also set at 11 hertz, and synchronized with the white noise generator. The combined effect of which is to reduce anyone inside the cell to a screaming, helpless suppliant within moments. According to the Observer, the equipment was referred to as prisoner disorientation equipment within Electronic Intelligence, run by 3 former London policemen, while the bulk of the £1 million contract involved the installation of bugging equipment and concealed video cameras in the rooms and cells of the special branch headquarters. These people are sick. All right. So, I want to tell you a little story. So first things, I didn't share last night about, here, let me drink some water real quick. I didn't share last night about my implants because I felt like that might be a little bit too much all at once. Yeah. So I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to share about warfare in terms of targeting electronically. So this might go for a while, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so implants. I have several that I have dismantled and dissolved over time, and I've had removed. And there was one in my foot. There was one in my wrist. There are recent ones in my, so they talked about the tooth implants, like the transmitters being inside of the mouth in a cap in the tooth. Well, I have them installed on both sides of my cheeks in 2015 when I was living in Asheville. I woke up and I felt like I had been gone for about 3 weeks. Kid you not. And my gums were super sore above my teeth. Like, you know, that's the side of your gums that's like, you know, flat normally. Mine all have these metal things in there now. And those were sore and they were healing when I woke up. They were still healing. So I was way aware of it. And like I went to bed, my mouth was perfect. Like there was nothing wrong with my mouth when I went to bed the night before. Brushed my teeth. I had nothing on the sides of my, nothing. Woke up the next day and I had implants on both sides of my thing. Now, I had removed the implant in my foot, and the scar subsequently, they tried to put a tracker back in. Within 24 hours of me removing that one out of my foot, they tried to put another one back in. But my body, so then it became this big, huge scar. It was like a little tiny white scar before, and then it became a huge scar. And then I had that huge scar, and it turned into like what looked like a wart kind of, but it was a scar. It was like this huge scar on my foot. And then a crazy thing happened, and it disappeared. Like a couple years after that, like 2016. So 3 years. So 2013, I removed it. Within 24 hours, they replaced it, and there was a big scar there. And then in 2016, 3 years later, I was out of the country, and I was in Budapest, and it literally disappeared overnight. And there was a timeline shift, and like my friend and I both saw it, and it was a really weird experience. There was like a glitch in the matrix or something, and we both noticed it and commented on it while we were at lunch. And then the next day, it was gone. So that was fascinating and interesting, and I felt free for the first time in a long time. So that was another interesting aspect of it. And so these have been in my mouth since 2015. And then, I have marks on my skin and places where there shouldn't be marks. I mean, I've got all kinds of stuff going on. But at this point, all the trackers have been deactivated, right? And that's by design, that's intentional. I made that happen. I made sure that I took care of that because I wasn't willing to be tracked anymore the same way that I was. I had etheric trackers and I had physical trackers, right? And implants. And the programming I had already begun to dismantle and had a pretty good grip on the dismantling of all the programs. And I've been sort of clear and free of those kinds of thought forms for about 11 years now. But I can always tell when they're trying to influence my thought forms because it's so clear. Because I don't have any chatter anymore, there's now this fundamental input into the field of thought forms that are not mine, and they try to prey on my emotional body or make me upset or try to make me angry. And to me it's just an entity, or it's a programmed beam. I've also been hit with beams in my back, and then had nanobots break out on my back. I've had all kinds of weird targeting things happen over the years. But, coming from where I come from, it makes sense that I've always been sort of on the run until now, because now it's not the same. Thank God. I actually have a life now, so that's a big difference for me in terms of, what's going on with me. But the high-pitched tones and rings and strobe lights while I'm sleeping, and super high-pitched, me covering my ears and still being able to hear that's still happening. There's targeting that still happens on that level. And that's very intentional. And I don't believe I'm the only one, right, that's actually experiencing that. I think this whole building is actually being targeted, and it could be potentially in relation to the Wi-Fi signals and, things like that, the EMFs. So I don't really know what the source of it is, but I do know that in my bedroom when I'm laying down to go to sleep, it's audible. It's literally audible. The high pitched, it's so loud. It's so loud. And so it takes me a long time to relax and go to sleep. And energetically speaking as well, we have all the levels of cosmic light being deposited onto the planet, and people are sensitive to that, and I'm sensitive to all the energies like that. And then we have, the riots going on downtown, and you can feel all that energy. So, and I'm up high, so I can feel like the city, right? But electronic harassment is the primary form of targeting that they have been using now in modern times. And they've perfected it. They've perfected synthetic telepathy. They've perfected all the ways that they can control the minds of the population. And so what we're seeing is a result of that in the rioters, specifically more so than other people. We're seeing in the rioters those that have been sort of, playing video games and whatever, and they're, or popular social media and television and Netflix, and that's the population that we're seeing that's out there doing that damage. And so it's very clear that they're not operating on all cylinders. Like it's really clear, like the way they're thinking about it and the way they're expressing themselves, it's very clear that they're under some level of mind control, and that is being orchestrated very specifically to get people to riot and to do what they're doing. So the people rioting are actually different than like protesters, and different than, Trump supporters and protesters, and whoever's protesting whatever. There's a certain type of protester, and then there's a certain type of rioter. And the rioters are actually getting paid to do what they're doing, and they're preying on these people that need money, and they need support, and they're emotionally, maybe they're not in the best place right now. And so all of those factors are being preyed upon by the deep state, and the controllers, quote unquote. But they're losing the game. They're literally, they've lost the narrative. It's really clear now that they've lost the narrative, and they're scrambling to understand, how to get the narrative back, and they're not going to be able to, but they're still trying to implement all of these control measures across the board, across the world, for total domination and control. And it's really up to us and, our civil liberties to say, hey, no, actually, this is the time where we have to say enough is enough, and we're stopping this. And we have to speak up. But we need to do it in a way that's comprehensive rather than, this is just my opinion, sorry, comprehensive rather than dangerous. We're not going to make a difference by killing somebody in the street. That has no, it doesn't even bear any weight. It just is sad, and it's horrible, and it's violent, and it's wrong. That doesn't prove a point. That doesn't make a statement. That doesn't change anything. That's just violence. That's just senseless. But the people that are taking those actions, one, either they're getting paid for it and it's very specific and targeted, or two, they're desperate for whatever. I don't even know. Like, there's so many reasons why people are doing what they're doing right now. But the targeting itself is real. And it's important to understand the targeting so that you can recognize it within your own situation, and you can take your power back from it and not think that it's somehow you that's having those thought forms, because those thought forms are unnatural. And yes, you can have your so they prey on the emotional body, and they prey on the emotions of a person and the ego of the person and a fear of the person. So those three categories are how they go about targeting somebody, is through emotional, like love or friendships or deep bonds with people. And then your ego, like making you feel like you're going to get somewhere, you're going to be successful or, famous or whatever. And then fear, like the fear of something going desperately wrong. So those are the three ways that people get hooked in to a narrative, right? And then guilt, like them guilting everybody about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, and virtue signaling people and shaming people and projecting and blaming, all of that. And then like citizens being, what's the word? Oh my God, my brain is so fried right now. Citizens being like the gestalt, So I'm kind of really looking forward to finishing this book and then going into this book, because this book talks about an actual guy that was in the field, and he was pretty much the most famous deep state spy, remote viewer in the world, basically. The top of the chain, you know what I mean? And he got out and he wrote a book, and it's fascinating. So I hope you're enjoying watching these story times. I don't know. Nobody ever comments, so I don't really know if anybody's watching ever. I just feel like you're listening to my voice and that's it. But, whatever. I'm talking to thin air. I love you. I hope you're having a beautiful Sunday evening, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.